NC Pork, raising the bacon, raising the bar. And then there were two. It's Florida and Houston playing for the national championship on Monday night at the Alamo Dome. And this is Time Out, the Tobacco Road basketball show and our national championship preview with the coach, Kerry Keating, and as always, the scribe, David Glenn. I am Mike Waddell, and guys, everybody thought it was going to be bacon and basketball time, the Blue Devils partying on Monday night in Durham, celebrating a national championship, but that was not to be. The Devils are done. And Houston, coached by Laurinburg, North Carolina native Kelvin Samson, is in the championship game, and he'll try to get his first crown against Todd Golden and the Florida Gators at 8:50 p.m. It's an earlier tip-off, which makes old guys like us excited. We don't have to stay up to almost midnight to see one shining moment. But I tell you guys, it just doesn't feel right with Duke not being there. I think we all felt like Duke had a pretty good shot, but Kerry Keating, you were the guy that picked this one and kept saying that you felt like Houston was going to get that dub over the Devils, and darn it if they didn't go and do that.
I think the one thing that stood out for me going into the game that rang very true in this game, and amazingly rang true because of the stats that for the first time ever in the history of the tournament happened yesterday. And Duke had a higher field goal percentage, more free throw attempts, more assists, fewer turnovers, more steals. 335 times that had happened in the tournament, and those teams were 335-0. Now it's one. And it's because of one stat that's not on there, and it's 18 offensive rebounds leading to 19 points. When we talked last week and I went through some of the things about Houston, I was flabbergasted by how well they shot the three because I knew how efficient they were on defense and obviously how well conditioned and tough they are. But the fact they were producing 12 to 15 points per game, this is nothing of an outlier by any stretch of the imagination. They exceeded that, and obviously exceeded that high mark of 15 to the tune of 4 more points, when that ended up being the difference in the game. It's a tough one to swallow if you're Duke. It keeps the bacon dream alive in the Keating household, as if Florida and Houston facing off. If the Gators win, there'll be a bacon party monthly in the Keating household. But yeah, I really enjoyed the game. It is everything I thought it would be. I actually said before the game, 69-65 Houston. It was pretty darn close. Although I will admit, with about, 3 or 4 minutes to go, I was like, when it was a 9-point game, like I honestly didn't think they could do it. And I'm just shocked, but really not surprised because, and as we'll talk some more about this, there was a clear issue with those two teams that I'm sure John and his staff understand, that helped Houston win that game. And it was a reason why John had to burn a timeout up 8, 6:26 to go. They hadn't scored in a while. You can use that as a reason, but they were tired. They were tired. They were fatigued. You could see it. You could see them. They didn't have the legs. That was a physical. That was a team. That was a team full of men, and they wore down the Blue Devils for sure. And here we are. Here we are hoping, if you're a Duke fan, that it could have been one more possession or one less call by the officials after a free throw. But really, when it came down to it, that rebounding stat is just a really tough one to swallow.
Yeah, Mike, the other part, it's always great to be with you guys, and congratulations to Coach for getting one step closer to the bacon. But we all know, whether we played athletics at a lower level or coached it at a high level the way Coach Keating has, or Mike, you as a Division I athletic director, there are times that your team loses and you lost to a better team. There are times that you think you were just as good or better, or maybe you were up big and you let it get away. If John Shire of Duke ends up coaching for 30 years as the Blue Devils head coach, this is going to be on his short list of the games that got away. Because as much as I want to give the Houston Cougars credit, and we'll continue to do that, I hope we have a chance to peel the onion a little bit here on the details of how this game and why it went the way it did. But Duke was up 14 with 8 minutes to go. Duke was up, as coach said, 9 with roughly 2 minutes to go. You know what the computers say at that point? You have a 98% win probability. 98% up 9 with 2 minutes to go. Duke led by 6 points with 34 seconds to go. They led by 3 with 25 seconds to go. They led by 1 with 19 seconds to go. And Duke lost after all of that and after doing a lot of right things. And a couple of things that I'll take away besides those details are the fact that Houston, Florida, and Auburn, we all know that Duke relies on freshmen to a different degree than everybody else. But what's less often mentioned is that of Houston's 8 players who competed against Duke, 7 of them had been with Kelvin Samson for multiple years. That doesn't mean they're all seniors, but it means that signing the 1-year transfer is different than signing the transfer that might be with you for 2 years, 3 years, or even 4 years in this COVID era. Among Florida's top 7 players, 5 of the top 7 have been with Coach Todd Golden for multiple years with the Gators. Among Auburn's top 7, 5 of the 7 spent multiple years with Bruce Pearl at Auburn. That number at Duke, and they used 10 guys against the Houston Cougars. 8 of the 10 were in their first year with John Shire and the Duke Blue Devils. That matters in tiny little ways that are sprinkled all over those 40 minutes. They matter in terms of communication on inbounding the ball, which became brutally difficult for Duke against an incredibly tough, physical, well-coached Houston defense. The only exceptions were Tyrese Proctor, a 3-year starter for Duke, and Caleb Foster, who didn't even play all that much in that national semifinal game. All those other guys in Duke's 10-man rotation are either true freshmen or they were brand new transfers to Duke, meaning this is the only year or first year that they have spent with John Shire's system. And I thought that mattered. It mattered in a dozen different ways down the stretch. It matters in terms of toughness, communication, experience. I saw the quote from Kelvin Samson after the game, and he did not intend it as a criticism or a shot at Duke. But he said to Tracy Wolfson of CBS, "We've been here before. It's not like we were down 20 to Duke. It's not like we were playing great, but we were trailing by a bunch. We felt like if we could get it close enough to put some game pressure on Duke, something good could happen for us." And obviously, Houston managed to put a ton of game pressure on Duke down the stretch. The Blue Devils did not respond very well. And it's Houston that gets the shot against Florida in the national championship game instead of the Blue Devils. But I do want to remind everybody and caution to draw too many conclusions about this. Because on the final, or I'll call it the next to last Duke offensive possession, the final one was the crazy off-balance three-pointer by Proctor that obviously had no chance to go in. On the next to last possession, Houston did so many little things really, really well that it's the difference between winning and losing. Here's what I mean. It's 68-67 with 17 seconds to go. And Duke is trailing with and inbounding the ball in the backcourt. John Shire had diagrammed a play during the timeout for who? Of course, the National Player of the Year, Cooper Flagg. Flagg gets the ball on a clear-out play. Probably what I would have recommended, you would have recommended, Coach Keating would have recommended, most Blue Devil fans would have recommended. It's a clear-out play for Flagg on the left wing where the other Duke players head to the right side of the court to give Flagg as much room as possible to operate. But Flagg was being defended by whom? Jawan Roberts, a 6'8", 235-pound fifth-year senior. How many guys that fit that size, dimension, and experience combination did he face all year? Jawan Roberts, for those who don't know, was first-team All-Big 12, but also All-Big 12 defense. So that's the guy dealing with the National Player of the Year. Strong defender, spent his entire 5 years playing for Kelvin Samson at Houston. Flagg heads toward the baseline, but he sees Joseph Tugler 6'8", 230 pounds, also a member of the All Big 12 All Defense team. He's an NBA draft pick, Joseph Tugler. So you're being guarded by Juwan Roberts, All Defense selection. The help flash comes from also 6'8", 230 Joseph Tugler, All Defense. He was third team All Big 12. Another great defender, a future NBA player. He forces flag just in that split second because his timing was perfect to help his teammate on defense. Flag's got to turn back toward the middle. He's in the lane area, kind of right in front of the free throw line. And instead of a high percentage shot where maybe the help was late, Flag's got a fade away, highly contested. Juwan Roberts' hand is stretched high in the air. It's a 12-footer that's pretty low percentage by Flag standards. And it was not just a little short, it was so short that it bounced way back toward the free throw line. That meant that Con Knipple, who's a really smart player and who crashed, he did exactly what he's supposed to do in that moment, crashed the boards on the left side. Kaman Malawach did what he was supposed to do, crashed the boards on the right side. Sion James did what he was supposed to do, crashed the boards in the middle. The miss caromed off so hard that I think it was Malik Wilson of Houston who grabbed it in the lane, and then obviously Duke had to foul. But one moment, if that ball had caromed left, Knipple has a layup and Duke probably wins the game. If it had caromed soft right, Malawach probably has a dunk and Duke probably wins the game because there would have been only a couple seconds left for Houston to respond. And maybe if Sion James had seen the angle as well as Malik Wilson did, maybe he gets that offensive rebound. But all those little things went right for Houston, and those little things didn't go right for Duke. And that's in a one-point game in the final seconds. That's how close Duke was to being the one to advance. That's how close Houston had to get the little things right to be the one to advance. And that's why I'm a little bit cautionary about drawing too many broad-based conclusions because, Duke let one get away, Houston earned it, but even in the final 3 seconds, it could have been a different team moving on.
No, I'll bring this point up too, because a lot will be talked about, certainly in the offseason, about the weakness of the ACC versus the strength of the Big 12. And after the game last night, I was texting back and forth with some coaches and friends, and it was a point that was made by many of us. It came back to essentially haunt Duke. And I say that in the sense that Houston won a game down 6 with 1:30 to go against Kansas.
Yeah.
And you know who hit the 2 free throws and put it into overtime? Juwan Roberts. So when he went to the line last night and the rest of the country saw the stat pop up, 65%, like, oh, well, 65%. Well, I got news for you. There's power in repetition, and having been there, done that. And having done that against Kansas at the time to cement their spot in the Big 12 standings, they were 7-0. Duke was or Kansas was 5-2. They were trying to. This is a big game, and it came back to help them last night. Juwan Roberts at 24 last night. This is the inventory you have to take in the offseason if you're a team like Duke is. What is the league going to look like next year? How is that going to affect our scheduling if, in fact, we're going to be an elite team again? And it can't just be, oh, let's throw an Illinois game in February in the Garden. There needs to be a plethora of quad one games and hope that they get some sort of challenge in the ACC, because this could become a recurring theme if they don't get it straight. Because these other leagues, the SEC and the Big 12, certainly representing in this Final Four, I think those experiences that both those teams had, Florida on the one side, Houston on the other, came back to help them keep a level head, not panic, and eventually come out on top in what ended up being 2 comebacks in both semifinal games. Just a small point that a lot of us wouldn't pay attention to out here in the bold North State because we're ACC driven, is that the Big 12 is putting itself through the paces just as much as the SEC is. And now here you have in the finals, the Big 12 facing the SEC for the national championship.
I was watching a piece of content earlier today talking about BYU and how with AJ DeBanza, they have made a real investment to be one of the top tier teams in all of college basketball. And the person who was voicing the content, said that the players nowadays don't want the brotherhood. They don't want the tradition. They care about the bag and people who are going to get them ready to play at the next level. How much of that is a concern for the ACC, which does appear in a lot of cases, which a majority of the program are adopting that mindset that they still want to recruit primarily through the high school ranks because they're just not hitting on the big time transfers? Is there any logic to what the guy from BYU was saying?
Well, as we already know and we discussed on previous shows, ACC Commissioner Jim Phillips sent the message to the ACC basketball coaches that what happened last summer can't happen again. And we gave those examples where the SEC basketball schools had 10 or more former ACC players that they plucked for those SEC teams, most of them NCAA tournament caliber SEC teams. I think there's still a place for your brand. You know, we might evolve into a world, Mike, where multiple leagues and multiple schools are offering a young man, similar amounts of money. Well, then those other things that have mattered for 100 years still matter as long as the price is similar. Well, what's your relationship with your head coach? Maybe you grew up dreaming of playing at a certain school. And if the money is similar at 5 different schools, you pick the one that you grew up rooting for, or that mom and dad and your buddies can go see your home games without too much of a headache. But the ACC, we all know, is going to double down on the amount of money that it's spending in name, image, likeness. It's really hard, by the way, for these coaches to have a crystal ball and know whether the ACC is going to be down or not. If you're John Shire at Duke and you know you're going to be good again, and I personally think the only other team we're sure will be good again next year in the ACC is Louisville. But if you're John Shire, you got to wait for all these 2,000 plus transfers to pick their new destinations. You got to wait to see which ACC top players stay at their current school or move on to the NBA. I mean, John Shire has his own roster management to deal with, but he knows the large majority of next year's roster already, and he knows the Blue Devils are going to be one of the top teams in the ACC. Knowing what the depth of your league is right now is virtually impossible. Now, in early April, it's essentially impossible. A month from now, you'll know, and that'll leave you a little schedule wiggle room. But one other quick point about Duke, and this is why I don't want to overemphasize too much, that it's not like you can't win the Duke way, right? They went 19-1 in the ACC. They won the ACC tournament without their best player, and they just made the Final Four. And in 3 years under John Shire, they've gone Sweet 16, Elite 8, Final Four, and a lot of other conference-related success. To me, to win a championship, you need truly, it takes a village to raise a child. It takes a village of players to win a title. And one of the things that happened to Duke, if you go back and rewatch that loss to Houston, anybody who's criticizing Cooper Flagg is crazy. 27 points, 7 rebounds, 4 assists, 3 blocks, 2 steals. He hit 3 of his 4 3-pointers, and he hit all 8 of his free throws, and he played really good defense for the most part. He missed a switch on a big 3 late, but the guy's human. He did far more good than bad. His fellow freshman, Con Knippel, was the other best player for Duke. He was 16 points, 7 rebounds, 3 out of 5 threes, all 3 of his free throw attempts. Those 2 guys played well enough to beat Houston, and the Blue Devils would have beat Houston if they got more help. To me, the only other guy in the Duke rotation who really gave John Shire what he usually gives John Shire was Malik Brown off the bench. 3 guys rose to the occasion for Duke against a physically and mentally tough and very experienced and well-coached Houston team. Tyrese Proctor didn't. He had 7 points in 37 minutes, missed 6 of his 8 shots from the field, missed all 4 of his 3-pointers, and missed a crucial front end of that 1-and-1 late as Houston was hitting both ends of its crucial 1-and-1s. That's a third-year starter, Tyrese Proctor, who picked a really bad time for his worst game of the NCAA tournament. Sion James is your de facto starting point guard. He had 0 assists in 27 minutes and made that key mental error on the inbound play where he tried to lob it to Cooper Flagg in the lane. It gets batted around. Houston ends up scoring on that possession and changes the nature of it. Coach emphasized rebounding. Kaman Malawach is 7'2" and 200 whatever zillion pounds. You know how many rebounds Kaman Malawach had in 21 minutes? Zero. Zero. That's an NBA lottery pick. If your third-year starter, Tyrese Proctor, is 0 for 4 from three-point land, your de facto point guard, Sion James, has 0 assists, and your de facto big man has 0 rebounds, some people aren't showing up. And we all knew it wasn't going to be just Cooper Flagg and Con Knipple to beat the Houston Cougars. It doesn't mean everybody has to play well. Milos Uzan is Houston's starting point guard. He did not have a good game against Duke, but 5 other guys did. At Duke, they played 10 guys, and 3, Cooper Flagg, Con Knipple, and Malik Brown, were the only 3 who delivered what their coach needed them to deliver, which means 7 guys didn't. And in some cases, you know, you're left wondering why an Isaiah Evans, who barely played, didn't play more, because obviously Proctor's rough night from the field was one of the reasons that Duke couldn't get over the top.
Yeah, I was really surprised down the stretch that you saw more Caleb Foster than you had seen in December and January and February. You saw a lot more of Caleb in March and April and less of Evans since the ACC tournament. I'm a big fan of his, but we're going to talk more about Duke and the ACC as we move on. Maybe another show this week that we drop after we have a winner of our Bacon and Basketball Bracket Challenge. As you said, it looks like Kerry Keating could win the Bacon if the Gators are winning. And in the Hoops Hog, the combined men's and women's event, Roy Lee Lindsay, the CEO of the North Carolina Port Council, is currently in the driver's seat. He is Boss Hog. So we'll have to wait and see what happens tomorrow night or Monday night if you're watching this on Monday between Houston and Florida. And this is Houston's 3rd trip to the Monday night game of the NCAA tournament, and their first since losing their first 2 appearances in 1983 to NC State and in 1984 to Georgetown. The Cougars' previous 6 Final Fours are the most without a title by any program in NCAA tournament history. And Kelvin Samson, yes, Pembroke State, now UNC Pembroke grad from Laurinburg, he is the 2nd most winningest active coach without a championship. Florida, meanwhile, is returning to Monday night for the first time since winning back-to-back titles under Billy Donovan in 2006 and 2007. It's the Gators' 4th trip all time to the championship game, having lost their first appearance in 2000. Both of these teams, the Cougars and the Gators, are 35-4. As we said earlier, it's a 30-minute earlier tip this year at 8:50 p.m. Eastern Time. And it's time now for our first of 3 big topics for this special national championship edition of Time Out. And it's brought to you by Atlantic Tire and Service, with 7 locations throughout the bold North State to service you. I know, DG, you take your cars in there all the time. I take my cars in there. Kerry, we need to get you to take the big land yacht that you drive in there. If you need car service, I mean, Atlantic Tire and Service, they do a great job because they look beyond the obvious and they try to find things that other people may miss. They do a great job of being good caretakers of your car. Just like if you're going to win a national championship, you have to be good caretakers of your entire roster. You have to look beyond the star players. We expect Cryer and Clayton to be the leaders for Houston and Florida. They are the studs and have been so all season long. But Kerry Keating, you're a coach that knows talent like few people do. Who are some of the other guys for the Cougars and the Gators who are likely to step up and to play a big role in their team cutting down the nets in San Antonio?
It's not a very big, deep team at Houston. And obviously the guards are going to get most of the attention for being such prolific shooters. At one point they were, I think 10 for 25 from 3, but like 8 for 30 something from 2. Obviously kept them in the game. The mathematicians will tell you 3 is still more than 2. But I was just super impressed with Tugler and Roberts. Tugler, after the technical foul of swiping the ball out of bounds out of Sion James' hands, And that was a big blow. That was a potentially game-ending blow, as David mentioned. It just added another point, another possession onto Duke's tally. But for him to come back and block Knippel's shot, I mean, it shows you the short, it's really hard as a coach to get any kid to kind of get over a play that you react in such a way that Kelvin did. And you want to really be careful of that. And Kelvin like turned and dropped to his knees. Like any kid's going to see that reaction and think, oh, it's going to magnify and man, I really screwed that up. And had the conversation for him to come back. He had 4 blocks in the game. The offensive rebound on the missed 3. I was amazed at how docile the announcers were at some of the plays that these guys were making. I mean, they were unbelievable plays. I mean, the guy goes out and makes a 3. There's like 20 seconds to go, and he tap dunks the thing on the lob like it's like a regular play. Like the stakes of the time of the game, I think it says, and again, we already talked about Roberts making the free throws, not in this time, but he already did it in the Kansas game. So like end of the game, like your guards are going to win games. Like I think Houston's front court is, if you can be underrated and be at this #1 seed and be what these guys are doing, they're as underrated as it gets. Now, the question is going to be how well can they corral Walter Clayton? Because I guarantee you these guards are going to chase him off the line and make him shoot even deeper threes, which he will. And he made 6 for 12 contested shots last night against Auburn. I mean, Clayton's obviously the star attraction. And look, I've been privileged to follow the journey of Steph Curry in covering the Warriors and watching him win in Golden State and still get a chance to watch that. And obviously, having raised our kids out there, they're still fans. There are times during the game, my son and I were like, this guy might be as close to Steph Curry as Steph Curry is. Like for what he's doing and the type of shots he makes, the irrational confidence, as we like to say about Steph, the irrational confidence that he has at this level and makes it look like they're not like forced shots. Like these are shots he can make. It's going to be an unbelievable matchup on the perimeter. But I think it's going to really come down to can they corral him into the big guys to blocking shots. One thing that Houston did that wore Duke down was there, and I said this before the game, they almost look undisciplined when they rotate because it's like they're there too early or they're over rotating. They're just so fast and strong to the ball at hitting guys and bumping cutters and switching when they need to and hard showing, sometimes double teaming, and then just flat out ripping the ball out of guys' hands. That they're going to do everything they can. And they already said they didn't want Flagg to beat them. And he almost did, right? 4 more inches, and he probably would. They're going to say the same thing. We're not going to let Clayton beat us. The key is, can Clayton now get Will Richard and get the bigs involved, right? Because he's going to find himself in the paint, and it's going to be how well can he distribute. He's not going to have as easy a time as he's ever had, Clayton, that is, to make these shots in the lane, let alone getting threes off. I think if there's keys to this game, it's can Tugler and Roberts stay out of foul trouble. There's a little bit more depth on the Florida side, but those guys are just flat out ballers, man. Those are the type of guys you can win in any style of game, any style of game. So this game presumably will be a little bit faster paced, even more so. This team, Florida, may be a little bit better conditioned than Duke. But I also said this, as much as I need and want Florida to win for obvious reasons, I did say if Houston won that game, they're going to be really hard to beat in a short turnaround because not that you'd have time to prepare for that. You can't really prepare for it, but to mentally and physically get ready for it. That's the problem. This is going to be a physically demanding game, and they already played a game once, obviously on Saturday. And a quick turnaround, it favors the team in better condition. I can guarantee you this, Houston will look like and play like the better conditioned team. It's how deep into Florida's bench can they go and how successful can those guys at Florida overcome any shortcomings that Walter Clayton possesses if the defense is successful.
Yeah, Mike, I like the starting point of your question, which it is the obvious, but it is the starting point for how to break this game down on Monday night. And that is Walter Clayton Jr. was a first-team All-American and has done nothing in this big dance to take the shine off of that accomplishment. And LJ Cryer was the third-team All-American and Houston's best player, and nothing he's done has taken the shine off of that accomplishment. In fact, although we discussed so many aspects of the Duke loss to Houston, John Shire, among the things he circled was that late first half run where Duke's up 31-19 with less than 2 minutes to go in the half. Houston has only scored 19 points in the first 18 minutes of the game. So you could go into the locker room down on yourself. Duke could have gone into the locker room super high and with momentum. Instead, LJ Cryer hit two of those late threes. Milos Uzan hit the other one. And there were some defensive errors by Duke along the way that John Shire specified were among the things that bothered him most. He was less bothered by the Blue Devils offense bogging down against a brilliant Houston defense. Just giving up those 3-pointers goes from 31-19 Duke to the halftime score being 34-28 Duke, which made everybody feel different about it going into and coming out of the half. But my answer to the, who should we look out for question is another Houston guard, Emmanuel Sharp. That possession that Coach Keating circled a minute ago, where, maybe the announcers, including my good friend Ian Eagle, who was on the play-by-play for CBS on Saturday night, maybe they should have sounded even more amazed. That single possession by Houston with about 3 minutes to go. About 3 minutes to go. It was a minute-long possession. You do not have a lot of minute-long possessions in major college basketball games. It was because Houston kept getting the offensive rebound. And part of the reason I bring that whole stretch up is Emmanuel Sharp missed a three, but LJ Cryer, a guard, swoops in and gets the offensive rebound. Then Houston drives and Flag smacks that block shot into like the 10th row. So Duke's got some momentum again. But then Flag is overplaying Emmanuel Sharp at the top of the key, way beyond the three-point line. And I'm not even sure, probably John Shire wanted him to do that because earlier John Shire was really mad at Duke defenders not getting out on three-point shooters. So Flag's really in Emmanuel Sharp's grill. Just like LJ Cryer, formerly of Baylor, has been around forever. He's either a fourth or fifth year senior. Emmanuel Sharp is a redshirt junior. So he's been around the block. It is easy to panic and stress out, as Duke often did, in the late moments of a close game in the national spotlight. To have the National Player of the Year coming at you at 6'9", and Emmanuel Sharp is probably a 6'3" guard, to have the poise to fake the three-point shot, even though Duke led by 9 with under 3 minutes to go. Fakes the three-point shot, goes to the rim, easiest layup anybody got in the final 3 minutes. Now it's 64-57 Duke with about 2 minutes remaining, but that was only because of grit, the aggression on the offensive boards, but also the poise of Emmanuel Sharp. A little bit later, Malik Brown fouled Emmanuel Sharp, who again made a really smart play near the top of the key. Sharp is an 88% free throw shooter, and he knew that both teams were in the one-on-one by that point. Malik Brown's a heck of a defender, and Sharp kind of initiated contact and fell in a way that the refs just had to call something. So what is the 88%? He shows the same poise at the free throw line that he showed on that layup blow by on Cooper Flag. Hits the front end of the one-on-one, hits the back end of the one-on-one. Remember, Tyrese Proctor was missing his front end, and there were some other issues like that for Duke otherwise. Later, and I'm talking all this is in the last 3 minutes of the Duke game. Same guy, Emmanuel Sharp, super savvy redshirt junior. He drives by the 7'2" Kaman Malawach. And remember, that's when Cooper Flag came over to help. I don't know how 6'3" Emmanuel Sharp got that shot off, but he drew the foul call. Another savvy veteran move while dealing with a 7'2" future lottery pick and a 6'9" future lottery pick. Again, he goes back to the line. Again, what does he do? Hits the first, hits the second. Now it's a 4-point game with a minute to go. Emmanuel Sharp, later in that same stretch, sees Cooper Flag charging at him, calmly lets him fly by on that three-pointer on the right wing, sees Flag stretching at a three-point attempt, lets the big guy fly by, resets his feet, and calmly buries another three. That is as clutch a veteran move with your team's season on the line, and that's not even your best player. LJ Cryer made plenty of plays himself. But to the point of your original question, Emmanuel Sharp was that superhero second scorer for Houston to go with the unbelievable forward play of Juwan Roberts and Joseph Tugler. You know, just as your starting point of those two great guards, the starting point to me for Houston, Florida is also Houston has the better forwards and Florida has the better guards overall. How does that shake out on Monday night? We'll see, but I expect another close game, just like the ones that we saw in the national semifinals.
One of our great partners here on the North Carolina Sports Network is the Founders Group and Steeple. Want to thank Michael Berard and all of the folks there for their generous support over our first 2 years of operation. And they're a great group right here in North Carolina, just like Kelvin Samson is our representative in the national championship game this year. He is a native of Laurinburg, went to UNC Pembroke. Back then, it was called Pembroke State. But I'd bet, guys, if you were to do a poll among all of the coaches in college basketball, it would be a Reagan Mondale type of landslide in people pulling for Kelvin Samson to get his first national championship on Monday night in that game against the Florida Gators. What do you guys think about Kelvin Samson? Is he the sentimental pick for everybody in college basketball right now that's not a Gator fan?
Yeah, I've known Kelvin a long time, and I was a young coach. Obviously, he's a little bit on the older side of where I'm at, and a lot of times when you're out on the road and you're recruiting, especially in the spring and summer times, you find yourself in common places or hooking up with your boss. And at that time, I think we're at UCLA and got a chance to go out to dinner with him. He also visited our offices when I was working with the Rockets, and the time that he was in between. I'm pretty sure at the time he had just started or getting ready to start at Houston. So he was just in the early stages of building this program, and obviously it's well documented. Just a really super likable guy, down to earth, very honest, very, very, very upfront, and I think very appreciative of others that also are good coaches as well. A lot of times ego can get in the way with guys, especially when you get to be a head coach. I don't see him having that type of ego that gets in the way of him being a really good coach in person. And the thing that I appreciate about him, especially now, and it's going to get challenged a little bit as these group of kids move on, because one of them at least started pre-portal, right? And pre all the NIL stuff. So it's going to be a little bit of a challenge, is that he has prided himself on building his program from within, developing coaches and moving guys up to the ranks of managers, into student assistants, to graduates, to coaches. Certainly has, brought his son along now, where he's hoping that he can eventually either run this program or have his own program. Quantas White will leave and go be the head coach someplace else next year. They don't take, I think he said they don't take phone calls or resumes. Like, he's really trying to do it the right way by building a strong internal unit that cares about each other. And it shows, and they play the way, and this always happens, guys. 95% of the time take on the personality of your coach. Well, that's why it's easy for us to say what type of person Kelvin is, because look how these guys are playing. And he has been smart and advantageous in taking a guy like LJ Cryer, who's now playing in his second national championship game and has a chance to be the first player to win a national championship with two different teams. The first be Baylor. So he's found the right guys to mix in with the guys that he's had. And I can appreciate that, not having the knee-jerk reactions to go out and find or buy a bunch of guys, to develop men, to hold them accountable, and to develop a culture that I think is sustainable and that will carry on. The thing that stuck out to me, and it's a blessing and a curse to have access to all of these things that we do now, but to see Marcus Sasser's reaction last night watching the game, and his point that he made about Kelvin, right? So you can tell that he's having an impact on these guys long after they're gone, and obviously meant something for Marcus, not just in the pride of Houston, but the fact that he really cared that Kelvin had a chance to do this. So, yeah, if you're Todd Golden, it's you against the world in this one. You're young enough to go back, if you will. The age factor is going to come in here. The sentimental choice will definitely be Kelvin. Unfortunately for Kelvin and Todd, it's going to be left out on the floor, but you'll definitely have people, I think, the large majority of which pulling for Kelvin to get this national title.
Yeah, Mike, given that we are coming at everybody here in the bold North State, as you like to call it, there is that tie that you mentioned earlier that's going to have a lot of people in our neighborhood rooting for Kelvin Samson. Anyone who needs another layer of that cake is just a quick reminder, he turns 70 years old later this year.
Oof.
And, that's a number where, a lot of guys have already retired, but you hit 70, you're near retirement. Even if you might want to coach another 5 years. We saw Jim Boeheim go to what, 77, and Coach K went into his mid 70s. So there are more examples than there used to be. But he's near the end, if you want to put it that way, of a very long and impressive road. And we don't know how many more times he's going to be back in this kind of an environment with a chance to do something that in his case he hasn't done yet. I think there's only 7 maybe active NCAA coaches who have won the NCAA title. So he could add his name and make it 8. Somebody's going to, obviously, either Todd Golden or Kelvin Samson. But Kelvin Samson mentioned a quote that he said he estimated he heard from his dad 1,000,000 times since Kellen was born, and that is lack of discipline will cost you games far more often than greatness will win you games. And I might be getting a word or two wrong, but you can tell in a world where basketball teams are being microwaved and Houston even has, I think, 3 of the Cougars' top 8 are transfers, but that means 5 were signed and developed the old-fashioned way, high school, and some of those guys. If you saw Juwan Roberts accepting his, they always give you a lot of cool stuff, frame jersey, et cetera, on your senior day. I mean, everybody's crying when Juwan Roberts, who has said that Kelvin Samson has helped him as a basketball player, but more importantly, has helped him through so many things as just a young man who hit some difficult times. I don't even know all the details of those difficult times, but that Kelvin Samson was a rung among the rocks as a human being that he leaned on during those low times. And that, of course, he celebrates these great times with. That senior day moment, I thought, was symbolic. But that quote from his son, you can tell that the guys play that way. Lack of discipline will cost you more games than great talent or greatness will win you games. And that's how Houston plays. That's the reflection of Kelvin Samson's personality that Coach Keating is describing. And to me, it's just a reminder that even in an era of microwaved basketball teams and a lot more guys than used to be the case who are only on your roster sometimes for a single year, the culture word still applies. And whether it was Kelvin Samson's teams at the end of their time in the American Athletic Conference, they were always winning either the conference tournament or the first place trophy or both. We're now 2 years into their Big 12 experience. It's been a seamless transition, a jump to the Power 5. Now he's in the national championship game with Big 12 titles in his back pocket. It's an amazing story. He is that down-to-earth guy. I was calling him in his various stops, Oklahoma, Indiana, et cetera, just as the guy who hosted the statewide David Glenn show in North Carolina. Typically the Oklahoma coach or the Indiana, Mike, all the in-state coaches say yes to us pretty much every time we ask. But if you're calling somebody halfway across the country, there's not an obvious connection or why they should do your show out of the 100 invitations that they get. Kelvin Samson, comfortable in his own skin, down to earth, easy to talk to. We discussed several times his roots here in North Carolina, his ethnicity and the pride that he takes in representing Native Americans generally, or his tribe specifically, and the emphasis that he places on the importance of raising young men, while at the same time, obviously you got to win basketball games to keep hanging around long enough to help mentor young men. But he's an easy guy to root for, and especially in our neighborhood, I would imagine it would be that landslide type victory if it were put up to a vote.
Another fun fact about Kelvin Samson and his ties to North Carolina, also a little homage, as you know I like to do, to small college basketball, is that the guy who hired him as the director of athletics at the University of Houston at the time is former Guilford College basketball player and current Arkansas athletics director, Hunter Yurachek. So it's nice that Hunter saw the talent in Kelvin Samson to come and revive that program at Houston. Of course, We are getting ready for Bacon and basketball. Our champions will be announced on Tuesday. The men's bracket champion, the women's bracket champion, and the North Carolina Hoops Hog. This weekend, David Glenn and I will be at UNC Wilmington in Brooksfield for the big Seahawks William and Mary baseball series. We'll be cooking big time barbecue out there with our friends Jimmy Galeese of King Neptunes and also Jimmy's, and then Bob Hubbard from the original Saltworks will be feeding both the tribe and the Seahawks, having a good time out there. And David might even get a chance to throw out the first pitch. We have great looking t-shirts that we're going to be giving out. So come out to Brooksfield on Friday night, first pitch 6 p.m. for the tribe against the homestanding Seahawks. And then the following weekend, 2 weekends from this weekend, the North Carolina Sports Network will be making our first appearance at a NASCAR sanctioned race as stock car racing returns to the Rock in Rockingham, and we'll be taking North Carolina by train to that and taping a lot of fun content with folks on the way to the Rock. So stay tuned for that. We'll have more on all of these things coming up at our website, ncsportsnetwork.com, and also on social media at the NC Sports Net. But it is time, guys, now to get your predictions for the national championship game. 35-4 Houston out of the Big 12 against 35-4 Florida, the Gators out of the Southeastern Conference. Kerry, we'll start with you, and then David, you can bring it home. Who's going to win it on Monday night, Kerry? I think the bacon, I can smell the bacon cooking, but will it be served in the Keating household? That's the question.
Well, I am rooting for the Gators to bring home the bacon, and that is a pun intended. But I fear the Cougars because of what they were able to do on Saturday, and that's what I said before the game. If they pull out that game, their ability to be physical, their experience in close games and short turnarounds like that, I think plays a factor and almost evens this playing field down to a pick 'em. I know Florida's a slight favorite in this, and that's mostly because of Walter Clayton Jr., who was the first player since Larry Bird to have back-to-back 30-point games in the Elite Eight Final Four. I mean, he's putting up historical runs right here. I don't think you can stop Walter Clayton. I think you can contain him because there is a level of physical play that Houston employs on the perimeter. The big key for me, guys, in this, and I tried to pull that out of the Duke game before, and I was a little prophetic in the fact that Isaiah Evans never got his chance at it. I think it's Ruben Chinaloo. If there's one guy from Florida that's going to be able to go pound for pound, man for man, muscle for muscle, rebound for rebound with the front court of Houston, it's Ruben Chinaloo, the Washington State transfer. 9 rebounds against Auburn, 8 per game in the tournament. Has the physicality and the body to be able to not be affected as much as Condon and Hawk will. Those guys will get thrown around a little bit, and Condon will try to bring those guys away from the basket and drive and play more of a face-up for driving creator for Richard and for Martin and for Clayton, if you will. But I think Chinaloo's the guy that's in the middle of all that probably has to play more than 22 minutes, probably has to play closer to 25, if not 30, and really has to do a way better job. And in this case, all you got to do is get 1 rebound, but way better job than Malwatch did rebounding the ball last night against Houston. I think Chinaloo's up for the task. I think he's got the physicality and the mentality. And it's going to be a battle in the paint between those guys in Houston and Ruben. If there's a key for Florida outside of the obvious, it's going to be him and his ability to rebound the ball on both ends of the floor, offensively and defensively. But also maybe find himself in some dump-off positions when they take away Clayton, as we talked about, and just swarm him in the lane, that he can get some finishes off those dump-offs if they're not kickouts to Martin or to Richard. I think it's going to be a great game. I predicted Florida before. I have to stick with that and keep the mojo going. But I'm excited to watch this game almost as much as I was excited to watch that Houston-Duke matchup before it happened last night. It became all too true. So looking forward to this game tomorrow, and hopefully we'll be eating bacon in the house here not too long after Florida brings it home.
Yeah, we've all learned that it's risky to bet against Coach Keating on this stuff. And if I were in Vegas, I would back away from the betting window because really, I did like the Gators over Auburn. and Duke Houston went down to the wire such that it could have gone either way. I do think Florida is the more well-rounded team. I do think Florida has a little more depth. I like the fact that Florida has, I think, more depth at guard, where Walter Clayton Jr. is not only a first-team All-American, but a senior. Elijah Martin, senior. Will Richard, senior. Denzel Aberdeen, junior. Those are the four guards that are going to be on the floor most for Florida. And they have all, in different ways at various times, risen to the occasion. I'm not as convinced of the consistency of the Florida big men. Alex Condon is viewed by some as a potential first-round NBA draft pick, and there have been stretches where he's really disappeared during this NCAA tournament. But Chinaloo, who's a young guy, and shout out to the international influence at the Final Four, by the way. The Gators found Chinaloo at NBA Academy Africa. He's from Senegal. And they found Alex Condon in Australia. So two of their 7 or 8 most important players are true international imports. I know, Mike Waddell, you've been wondering why certain teams in our backyard don't find more such players, the way a Duke has Kaman Malawach from NBA Africa and also has Tyrese Proctor from Australia. But overall, Kelvin Samson, the culture, the experience factor tilts his way a little bit, the grit, the toughness. But I think the more talented team is going to win, and I think that more talented team is the Florida Gators. I hope I'm wrong because I'm rooting for Kelvin Samson, but I knew Florida and Duke were the 2 best teams going into this whole tournament, in my opinion. And I think it's going to be the Gators cutting down the nets on Monday night.
NC Pork, good for the plate, great for the state.